All right, welcome everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Caleb Monroe, and I am the Executive Director of Youth Celebrate Diversity, and I'm so excited to be here today and joined by the three co-chairs for YCD Colorado. And I'm going to ask them to go ahead and introduce themselves now. So Rohan, why don't you kick us off?
Hi, everyone. My name is Rohan Gudanti, and I am a senior. I go to Smoky Hill High School. I was actually on the executive committee for 3 years before this year, so I'm really excited to be co-chair this year.
Thanks. And Lamise.
Hi, sorry, my name is Lamise. I'm a senior at Overland High School. I'm also a co-chair, and I, joined YCD because the executive committee, because I just thought it was a really cool thing that we were doing, just trying to bring people together. And I'm excited to help all of you guys learn how to make your own kind of spaces.
Awesome. And Isa.
Hey guys, I'm Isa Bravo. I'm a senior at Dawson School, and this is my second year on the executive committee. Last year was my first year, and I'm really excited for what's to come this year.
Great. And I also wanted to introduce one of our two adult organizers for YCD Colorado, Dr. Kennette Richards, who's here with us today.
Hello, everyone. I'm really excited for this year. I think this is my 8th year being involved with YCD in some capacity. So I'm really excited and looking forward to learning about you all and working with you.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share a presentation and then hand it over to the co-chairs. Before I do, just a quick heads up that we are recording this session for folks that couldn't make it today. So with that, one moment. All right. Can you all see the presentation? Yep. Cool. So we are here to talk about how to start and improve a youth-led anti-oppression club. And our co-chairs are going to lead us through the topics. We just went through welcomes. Here's an awesome picture of our co-chairs. We're going to walk through creating a new club. So if you don't have one, what are the questions to think through? Getting your club going for the school year. So if you have one already, what do you do to kind of get going? And then some next steps and ways YCD can help you. And we'll have a Q&A session at the end. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to the co-chairs to talk us through how to create a new club. Lamise, I think you're on mute.
Thank you for letting me know. I'll get it started. And so starting off with how big your club or group should be, you should probably aim for a minimum of 8 to 10 members. That's actually what I also aim for in my club. And you can start with just 2 or 3, and most of the time, like over time, people will join. So it's okay if you don't get discouraged. It also takes time for, like I just said, the membership to go over the first year. So, just try to get more people to join if you can. And groups larger than 30 can be difficult to manage because honestly, groups bigger than 30, things like NHS would probably require multiple leaders. So just keep that in mind. But yeah.
So the next thing we're going to talk about is what should our club focus on? And the first thing to ask yourself when you're considering this question is, why did you and your peers form the club? What are your goals? What are your purposes? Usually that's a good place to start because you know what you're passionate about. And if you have a passion, then I think that can create something really beautiful. However, YCD does have 3 foundational concepts, and these can also help you if you're looking for inspiration. So you can focus on bonding and coming together around a single identity. So a Black Student Alliance or a Muslim Student Alliance is a good example. Basically, you have a group of students who have some kind of shared experience or identity where they can bond and really talk about what that means. Do you want to bridge differences focused on one major form of oppression? So A good example of this is a GSA, a gay straight alliance, or a gender sexuality alliance. And here, basically, what's talked about is, again, a shared experience, but it's also talking about bridging differences. So the kind of differences in diversity within the LGBT community in terms of gender and sexuality. And the last approach would be focusing on fighting oppression in all of its forms. So that could just include like a general anti-oppression club. Every approach is valid, and every approach can have a really good purpose. It can really be inclusive, but if you're trying to start up, one thing that YC usually recommends is the third approach. So focusing on oppression of all forms, because that actually creates a broad group, and that usually makes it easier for students of all identities to find a place to come together. It's also important to keep in mind what clubs and groups exist when you're starting to form this new group. You don't need to reinvent the wheel, and you don't need to replace existing groups, even ones that focus on a single identity. Instead, what you should try and focus on doing is building connections with these clubs and standing in alliance with these clubs.
So this is the fun part where the club founders and the group gets to be creative. Every group is encouraged to come up with their own name that is meaningful for them. But make sure that you're thinking of a name that will work for several years to come, as your group will stay long lasting, and make sure it promotes the values of the group clearly. There's some examples that you can take from the YCD network that you can use for your inspiration. They're listed on the screen, and some are Diversity Leaders Club, Inclusion Task Force, Social Justice Club, and so on.
Luis, I think you're muted again.
Sorry, give me a second. So how long should your club meetings be? So 60 minutes is usually too fast, 90 minutes is just right, and 120 minutes is usually too long. And I like to think of it as like a class period, probably like 90 minutes is pretty much just right. Yeah, just be good about your time. Make sure that, you know, it's not all just like talking, it's not all just like listening. Just make sure it's balanced so you have enough time to get through everything and nothing seems too rushed.
So the next question to answer is, when should your meetings take place? And the answer is really, it depends on the group. You really need to look at the schedule of students and really make sure that you know what conflicts are pretty common among students, that you can try and create dates that are accessible for pretty much everyone or close to everyone. So that's where it really becomes important to survey students and ask them what conflicts they have. So examples of conflicts to keep in mind are athletics and sports, and other extracurricular activities, like maybe, for example, a lot of people in your group are going to meet for NHS every Wednesday, once a month. You could try starting a later starting time so that people who have a conflict might be able to come later. You could alternate meeting times so that if someone can't make it one week, they can come another week. But one thing that's really important to consider in terms of equity is transportation. What if a student has to take public transportation, or use the school bus, or doesn't have a vehicle, or maybe they have to go to a job? Those are all really important to consider. So it's really important to be mindful of conflicts students have and take a very calm approach and find the best solution that works for everyone.
All right, I want to invite Dr. Richards to chime in on what role should a teacher or adult play in a youth-led anti-oppression group?
I was going to just completely stay silent and then say, that's the role. But there really are some things that probably need to take place, particularly in school settings, because they have all these other kinds of parameters that folks need to think about. And of course, what's really nice is that YCD does provide some training on this, because there are a lot of adults who are willing to do this, but they are not quite sure what to do or how to do it or when to do it, etc. So the first role that they should have is to get some training. And then they really should be mentors in the space, and they should be giving the space to the students to be the leader. It's one of the things that you'll see me do throughout the course of this time that we're all together as an executive committee, which is why I turn my video off. I notice that sometimes when my video is on, students think they should ask me the questions, and really you should be asking the co-chairs. And so you will notice that my video is off. And then student leaders and mentors, they should have explicit conversation early in the process. You should talk to the adults that you want to be involved, or adults who say they want to be involved, or you might reach out because you know a particular teacher that you really like, and that teacher is really big on social justice. And maybe you've talked to that teacher about sponsoring that, because that's also one of the things that a lot of schools require, is that there's an adult sponsor, and that really is for legal reasons. And so in that case, you should talk to them up front and have some really explicit conversations about what their role is. And I think it's 100% okay to say, really, we want to lead this, but we need you to step in if X, Y, or Z happens, or things of that nature.
So one of the biggest questions to ask your group is, how will you guys make decisions? This is typically one of the hardest parts of your group, but with a unified approach to it, it will work very smoothly. A way to approach this is a consensus discussion. YCD promotes consensus as a better, more inclusive decision-making model for groups rather than the traditional majority rules approach. In addition to providing virtual training on what consensus is and how to build and achieve it, there's also a one-page explanation in a PDF guide that's all on the YCD website. And the training is for students, and it's typically an hour, and you can sign up for it on the website as well.
And before we move on, can I ask Isa or any of the co-chairs to just give maybe folks who aren't familiar with the word consensus an idea of the definition of consensus? Like, what is it for people who maybe aren't as familiar?
I could probably give a definition of consensus. So consensus is a little bit different from a majority vote, because we never want to create a decision where not everyone feels happy or comfortable with the decision. So with consensus, basically what you're trying to do is make sure that everyone in the group agrees with the decision. That doesn't mean it has to be their first choice, but they need to be comfortable and satisfied with whatever decision you make, or with what your group makes. For example, within the executive committee, we always talk about consensus when we're picking workshops, because we want to make sure that everyone feels happy and comfortable and satisfied with the workshops that are going to be presented that year, even if it's not their first choice.
Awesome. Lamise, are you able to walk through the conflict resolution?
Yeah, I was having some issues with my computer. Sorry about that. Can you see me?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. So sorry about that. How will we resolve conflict? So conflict is inevitable. I think any kind of social gathering, conflict can always happen at any time, anywhere. And so it's essential that you prioritize training on how to resolve the conflict in advance, because as a club leader, you're gonna probably be, well, not probably, you are responsible for the environment and kind of vibe of the area and room. And with YCD, something that's like as big for human rights, social justice, and like just reform in general, it promotes like restorative justice, restorative practices, and that's an approach to like conflict resolution, meaning that like it's not supposed to be kind of like a cut and dry kind of situation where you're like, oh, you messed up, you're gone. So we really do want to work with everybody, and that's what you should be trying to do as a leader, to resolve the situation and conflict, and sign up for trainings on how to resolve them, and by using restorative practices at ycddiversity.org.
So the final question to kind of consider when you're starting a club is, do you need school approval to start a club? And the simple answer is no. If your school does allow you to do that, that is the most convenient option usually, but it's definitely not required. If you do want to organize it through your school, because that tends to be the easiest way to get members, you can talk to the director of activities or whoever's in charge of extracurricular activities and kind of see what the process is for a club to get approved. And if you feel like it's fair and you want to go through with it, that's totally valid. If you feel like it's not fair, or if it's too much work, or if it's not necessarily worth it, that's okay too. You don't have to do it. If your group does try to go through a school and you meet resistance or you can't talk about certain subjects, try and look for community organizations that can maybe be willing to host your club. Like I remember in middle school, for example, it was very difficult for us to get a space to talk about LGBT issues specifically. And what I wish I'd known at the time is I think there's a place, I think it's called Rainbow Alley in Aurora. And I think that would have been a really good place for us to meet and talk about LGBT issues. Oh, and my city provides a sample club constitution. So if you need some guidance on kind of the rules or things that you might be able to get from a school, but you can't get from a school, you can always look to that.
All right, so we've talked through a lot of the key questions that you're going to want to walk through as a group when you are starting a new club. So hopefully that gave you a good outline of things to talk through and think about. And so now we're going to transition to talking about how to get your club going at the beginning of the school year. So one of the things that we've learned through the years is the importance of providing training for student leaders before they are put into a leadership position for the school year. So if you have an existing club and you already know who your chairs are, or your co-chairs, your president, whatever those leadership roles look like, YCD can provide some leadership training sessions for your leaders so that they can walk into their roles having thought through and been trained on some of these topics that they're going to run into. That might include some basics around inclusion and social justice, some key concepts. It could include brainstorming icebreakers and how to get your group bonded. It could be the training for adults on their role in this kind of work that Dr. Richards talked about. It could be about establishing group norms and how to keep your group members accountable to them, how to lead discussions, how to make decisions through consensus, or how to manage conflict, like Lamise talked about. So there's a lot of different trainings that your group and your leaders could request. And all of that is offered free of charge through the YCD website, where you can sign up, and we'll provide more specific information or instructions on how you can request these kinds of training sessions in a moment.
So the most important first step would be recruitment. So you can actually have members in this amazing club that you're going to build. YCD challenges your group to work hard at recruiting a diverse membership so that the whole community is represented in your club or your group. That means taking extra steps to encourage participation from students who may not appear interested at first. It means reflecting on barriers to participation and taking steps to remove those barriers. Think about the purpose of your group and then reflect on who is not represented already. Some questions that you can reflect on to further benefit your group and the recruitment process is, what is the racial makeup of these members, especially the group founders or officers and leaders? Does the club reflect the racial makeup of the school and community more broadly? What steps can you take to make students from all racial backgrounds want to join? Obviously, these questions do not pertain to identity-based groups, for example, Native Student Alliance. What's the gender representation in your group? What steps can you take to ensure students from all gender identities are being represented and included? Are there members in your group or club from all classes or years in your school? Sometimes clubs can be way too centralized on a group of friends who are in the same grade. And what steps can you take to build a broader coalition of students that represents all years so that you can have a pipeline of members and leaders for the future of your club? Is your meeting location accessible for students with disabilities? YCD challenges groups to conduct extra outreach to disabled students to make sure they feel included and welcomed in your group. Your recruiting process at the beginning of the year generally requires 2 to 3 weeks, and sometimes even longer. Consider hosting info sessions for students that may be interested but want more information. If students who are interested and can't attend due to timing or location of meetings, consider changing the schedule to make it more accessible to everyone.
Okay, so for bondings and check-ins, don't underestimate the importance of bonding. Honestly, even in my own club, we didn't really I feel like work as a club until we started to get to know each other and be there for each other. And the first meeting should be devoted to bonding. Honestly, that's where you probably introduce your icebreakers and just have everybody kind of go around and introduce themselves and stuff like that, just to have an idea of who each person is. And kind of also get the vibe of the room, and consider including so the icebreakers that I had brought up, try to make them kind of, I guess, specified for certain reasons. So some icebreakers could be for learning names, some other ones could be for learning people's stories, and other ones could just be for having fun and letting your guard down. And so having a pointed kind of game or question could help you learn so many different things, but in a very structured way where it's not messy and people can actually remember each fact about a person, and try to mix it up each meeting. That way it doesn't start to run kind of tired and boring, because I can tell you one thing is people's attention spans can a lot of them are small, honestly, after a while, if you don't kind of change things up. And then say you're checking in with the members of your group, possibly, instead of having an icebreaker. That way it comes off more as if a person-to-person connection kind of building, especially if you're a leader. That would be the best thing you could do to get closer with your members.
And before we move on, Lamise, can you quickly explain what a check-in looks like for people who maybe haven't done that before? Or do you want, if you want help from Rohan or Isa on that also?
Well, please, Rohan and Isa, feel free to add, because I'm sure I'll be lacking. But honestly, a check-in to me kind of just summed up is pretty much just first just seeing if the person's okay, just to make sure that we're all mentally and physically okay to be in this space to share our truths, but also just checking in with how they are in the club as a member. How have you been feeling about this, or how far or ahead of you are you in this, such and such and such. But check-ins can be icebreakers, I said before, but I also feel they can also just be you're just talking to the member on your own, or if they're not even coming, reaching out to them and just checking in on them. But they could also look more, sorry about that. I am having so many different issues with my computer. My bad about that. But anyways, yeah, that's what I would view as a check-in. But please, Rohan and Isa, add anything else.
I think you hit on pretty much everything. Yeah, I would definitely say just even asking tell us a little bit about your week. You'd be surprised how many people just need someone to tell them that. So that's just my thought. So the next thing we're going to talk about are group norms. So essentially, if you don't know what we mean by group norms, once you've held all the info sessions and you've had your first meeting, or you're holding your first meeting actually, you basically want to establish some norms or some ways of meeting, or almost rules, although I would say it's a little less binding as rules, so that everyone knows what to expect and what's not okay. I think what's really great about group norms is that everyone gets to contribute to them, so everyone can really create a space where they feel comfortable. So we do have a virtual training for student leaders to learn how to establish norms, but there are some general guidelines that you can follow. So you should brainstorm some norms in advance that you feel are important, so you kind of enter the conversation with some specific goals in mind. I know, for example, it might be really important to make sure that a group norm that comes across is that everyone gets to talk and not one person dominates the conversation. But at the same time, balance that with group members getting a chance to volunteer ideas for norms, because it is their space as well. So you don't want to have the leaders simply just decide what the norm should be. One thing that you can always do is brainstorm a large list of ideas and write them down so visually everyone can see everything and you've gotten all the ideas out. And then you can ask the group how many norms you want to have. You can have 5 to 10, but the longer you go, usually the harder it is for people to remember. So if you can kind of look at similarities or overlaps, that can really help make the list as concise and clear as possible. And then once the norms have been set, you really want to create a visual reinforcement with perhaps some kind of poster or something that can be hung each meeting so that the norms are always visible and that they can be referred to at any time. It should be fluid. Don't just do the norms once and then kind of forget about them, because they're done for a reason. And if someone violates the norms, make sure to hold that member accountable and also refer to the norms. Again, we'll go, if you were to do the virtual training, we'd go more into depth with this in terms of holding club members accountable when they violate norms, while at the same time not making them feel like they need to be excluded from the group. But I think group norms are very important.
All right, so we have walked through how to start a club if you don't have one, and then we walked through some of the key activities that you're going to want to undertake to get the school year off to a good start, including recruitment, including group norms, including bonding and icebreakers. Once you get past that introductory period, obviously that's when your club really gets into the heart of the matter, and when you can really start to dig into the topics that you decided to focus on. YCD provides a lot of different learning opportunities and experiences for students, including the Colorado Youth Diversity Conference, which is coming up in January. We're also really excited this year that the students from YCD Colorado are going to be offering at least 4 different webinars with guest speakers on topics that the student board will be identifying. So we'll be announcing what those webinars are in the coming weeks. We don't know the topics yet because that group is going to have their first meeting next week to start on this process, just like the one that they've walked you through. But those will be virtual webinars that anyone can join. And so make sure you're following YCD on social media and on our mailing list so you can stay up to date on the different opportunities that we're putting out throughout the year. We also have on the YCD website a pretty big list of other youth-focused organizations that you could connect with for education or experiences, depending on what topic you're focused on. So you can look up resources on racial justice, on gender equity, on how to support LGBTQ students, lots of different topics, and all of that's on the YCD website. And if you are looking for something and you don't feel like you can find it there, you can always reach out to me, and I'm happy to help you with whatever kind of next steps your club needs in order to pursue the kind of change in your school and community that you're working towards. So we do also offer a guide, a PDF guide that walks through a lot of these same issues. It includes the one-page handout on how to build consensus that was mentioned before. And it also includes the sample club constitution that Rohan mentioned. There's a lot of really good information in there. It's offered free of charge. So you can go and download that on our website, which is ycdiversity.org. And then you'll have it handy to walk through all of these topics whenever you have a need to. We do offer a bunch of trainings that were mentioned multiple times through this session. You can find those under the Get Involved menu at our website. So again, it's ycdiversity.org. That's where you see an option to download the guide as well as to attend a virtual training. We don't have set times for these trainings, but rather we schedule them based on request. So if your school or your student leadership is really interested in a training on how to resolve conflict, you can go on there and click a request training button for the appropriate training and basically tell us, a good day and time for us to do the training is XYZ, and we'll work with you to try to get it scheduled according to whatever makes the most sense for your group. And again, in case I didn't say it enough, our website URL is ycdiversity.org, and that's where you can find all those resources. And with that, I think we'd like to open it up for any questions from the audience. So to ask a question, you can unmute yourself, you can share your video, you could type it into the chat. You can ask a question any which way, but the student leaders are here and available if you're not sure what to do on any front. Are there any questions out there?
Hi, I have a question. My name's Cameron. I'm with the City of Aurora. I'm a recreation supervisor, and I'm the liaison for the Aurora Youth Commission. And the Youth Commission actually just established a diversity and youth and inclusion subcommittee. So when I got the email about this, like, this is great because I have no idea on how to help these kids or these high schoolers on how to move forward and how to make sure they have a successful subcommittee and kind of lead them in the right direction. So I don't know if there's any adults on here that can, or if you guys want to give me some advice on kind of to help them with goal setting, like try to cast the vision on what they want to do and make sure we're leading them towards the right path of what to achieve their goals and things like that. So this is something new to me. I've never done something new to this before, but I want to do everything I can to make sure they're best supported and that they're successful in what they want to do.
Absolutely. I can offer a couple ideas, but before I do, Dr. Richards, did you want to share any thoughts, or co-chairs? You can feel free to chime in.
Co-chairs first. I was going to say co-chairs first, and then I'll chime in.
Well, I can go first. I think one of the best things you can do in terms of establishing a group is I'd probably just hold a meeting, honestly, and just have the students like discuss honestly what they've seen and what they'd like to fix. Because I'm sure a lot of students probably have some ideas on their mind. And then you can kind of from their narrow list, and then I don't know like what resources or what abilities the Aurora Youth Commission has, but you could figure out, okay, based on the resources we have at our disposal, what do you want to do? And I think that's one way that you can look towards a goal. Lumis or Issa, do you have any ideas?
That's exactly what I was going to say. I agree with Rohan. Also, just as an adult, just being like there, being support for your group means a lot more than you think it does.
I was also going to just add to that. I agree. Honestly, just making sure that you have those like guidelines to follow and like let people know that in the beginning. Not to mention also just don't gaslight them, because that'll kind of defeat the purpose of even having the club and that having a safe space. So as long as you're just making sure there's guidelines and people can at least be like respectful towards each other and listen to each other, I think like that's like for me the key things to making a club successful.
That's a really important point that you just made, Lenise. I think that in one of the things that I have found really important to youth is that when you open up a space that you really stick to the parameters that you set, and you're willing to be the person to step in and let students know, or youth in this case, since you're not in a school, would be youth, let them know that you really are there to support them. I think the other thing to do is to really just let them guide the process. Sometimes as adults, I'm guilty of this, so I'm going to speak from a first person perspective here. I hear young folks start to talk about some of the various things they want to do, and then I think to myself, let me just start to kind of persuade you to go a little bit in this direction with that, as opposed to staying with the direction that they want to. And I think that's a really critical thing to do. And I think that in a community space, it would be important to say, what is it in the community space that you think is happening that we need to tackle as issues, or as we come together, what are some things in the community that we might want to really be looking at to say that we can have some identity around, or some connected and unifying positions around. So those are the things that come to mind first. And usually youth will have some issue that's happened in a school space that is also a microcosm or a micro issue for, while it may be the school, it really is a macro issue in the community. And they're really aware of identifying those things, but really honoring their voice and giving them a lot of agency around the direction that they take.
Yeah, I think all of those answers are right up what I would say. I want to especially lift up what Rohan mentioned about not being afraid of just having a meeting to figure out a purpose, because sometimes it feels so ambiguous that you want more of an agenda or a sense as you walk into these meetings. But it's perfectly fine to have a meeting where you talk about nothing but what do we want to do? And that can be kind of a scary conversation for some people because it's so open-ended, but it's also really important that a group develop a shared sense of purpose, that even if people are coming for different reasons, and you're going to work that out through bonding and through your activities, that ultimately you want to achieve something, right? Everyone wants to achieve something that they all kind of agree on. And what that something is takes a lot of conversation. So having at least one meeting, and maybe even multiple meetings, to figure that out is probably, definitely very worthwhile. So hopefully that's helpful to you, Cameron. And the last thing I'll say is that if you would like some training, or if your leaders of your subcommittee would like some specialized training to get started, please feel free to reach out, and we're happy to help.
No. Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much, guys. I appreciate it. I was looking on the website and I found the place for all the trainings and stuff like that. So I think that's definitely going to help me out with what I can do and what I need to do, and helping give him some guidance on. And I'm going to present this to the subcommittee as well as another resource as well, so that way they can start making a decision on what they want to start doing. So this is good stuff.
Cool. So the next question we have in the chat, and it is, how often should we meet? Co-chairs, what are your thoughts on how often meetings should take place?
Well, I personally feel like it genuinely depends on the club. I feel like sometimes, and also how long each club meeting goes for. So if, let's say, you had like a 30-minute meeting, usually maybe like twice a week would make more sense than once a week. But if you have, let's say, like a 90-minute club meeting, then it wouldn't really make sense to do more than that. I also feel like depending on like what the work is for the club and how much you need to get done, if it requires that you need to meet multiple times in a week or month or whatever time span, then just consider that as well. But I would recommend personally, if it's like an affinity space, like a lot of these anti-oppression clubs are, I would recommend once a week and 45 to an hour, because that tends to be how long people can make time for things like this, and also how long their attention span is for. But that's just in my experience. So I would really just prioritize kind of getting a feel for like what you want to do, and also what people want to do in the club as well.
I think that's a great answer, Lanice. I would also agree, especially if you're meeting in the afternoon, which I think most of these meetings tend to be. I think once a week, and then, for 60 to 90 minutes is best, because I think, honestly, especially if you have very busy students, it's a lot harder to really get people to come more than once a week. And then I also think getting it done in one time is a lot easier for people. That being said, the world keeps going, life keeps happening. So if for some reason something, like really tragic or, something that really needs discussion happens, you can always have an emergency meeting. One route that you could try if, maybe like one time or once a week in the afternoon doesn't work is one thing you could do is maybe try meeting for a little bit of time before school once or twice a week. That's an alternate approach you can take if you feel like people are having trouble meeting after school. But I would always say, like, I think it's a lot easier for people to make afternoon meetings, so I'd always try that first.
I completely agree with what Lamis and Rohan said. And to add to that, I think at least for every club meet once a week, but I think it really is all situational. Like if you have an ongoing project that your group needs to be like has a deadline and it needs to be done, then maybe you need to meet more than once that week. Or like if it's finals week and everyone is swamped with homework, maybe you don't meet that week and make up for it other weeks.
Awesome, awesome answers. The next question is in chat also, and it is, what happens during the January summit or conference? So that's a question that all of the co-chairs should be definitely able to answer. So I'm going to hand that back to you again.
Well, there's actually quite a bit that happens, but to kind of condense it, I think it's a day-long diversity experience. So you get to do all sorts of cool things. So you'll hear from a keynote speaker. There'll be some kind of performance to hype you up. You'll get to go to workshops that you choose. And you can also afterwards, you get to meet with your school, people who went to the conference who are also at your school to kind of discuss, well, what now? And then there's also usually a closing performance. So it's a lot of fun. You usually learn a lot. And you can explore any topic that really excites you. Oh, and you get to have discussions with people that you might not normally have discussions with because you get to be in a discussion group that's pretty much randomly assigned and no one from your school will be there, which is a little scary, but I think very eye-opening.
All right. Are there other questions from the audience that we can answer? So we have a comment/question in the chat, which is a thank you to the amazing to the amazing co-chairs for the session. What is your all-time favorite icebreaker or check-in practice to welcome students into a space? It's a great question.
I can't say that I have like a specific icebreaker that like goes with by name necessarily that's my favorite, but if you can incorporate somehow just somebody talking about either their weekend or how they feel about something or just how they feel in general, I have found that that's the best thing to do because it starts a conversation and people just start to relate and they're like, I did that this weekend too, or oh yeah, things have been stressful lately as well. And so just anything that can really work those into, I would recommend because I feel like they just let people open up and it becomes a like less tense space.
One of my favorite icebreakers that I actually did with my student group that I facilitated during last year's, well this year, but last year's summit, January summit conference, I did like a group map. And since it was students from all across Colorado, we just went through everyone and we were like, oh, what high school do you go to? And then like on the map, we like put where their high school was. And at the end, we could see like everyone's pins in the map of Colorado. And I obviously if your group or your club is in your school and you're kind of all from the same space, it might not work as well, but you could do it with like where your home country is from or like what what culture that you participate in.
One of my favorite like icebreakers is actually two truths and a lie, which I think it works really well because A, everyone knows what it is, but B, it's a really good way to get to know some just like really funny, crazy, or even just like like mundane things about people pretty quickly. And I think it's always a good conversation starter. There's usually a few giggles. I think it's hard to say with check-ins, but I would say the best check-ins usually are the ones that are related to something going on in the world, because there's always something going on in the world. And I think if you can incorporate that into what you talk about, I think that'll really help people kind of open up and, you know, talk about how they're feeling.
Dr. Richards, is there a favorite icebreaker you've witnessed or participated in that you want to share?
You know, I have so many, I don't know that I have a favorite, and I have to be honest, I really don't. Every time I do a new one, I go, oh, I really like that one too. But I will share this one that I do really like, is because people always have their phones with them. You have people scroll through and pull up a picture on their phone, move around the room, and you play sort of like musical chairs, but musical pictures. So they move around the room, they mingle with people. When the music stops, you stop with the person that you're with. You show them the picture on your phone. You tell them why that picture is significant for you. And then they do the same for you. And then you start the music again and you move around and you now with a new person. So I like that one a lot.
Awesome. I'm going to share one as well. It's really an in-person icebreaker. I don't think it works quite as well virtually, but if you have a group of people that don't know each other really very well at all, you can get a big bag of M&Ms. Don't get peanut M&Ms in case of allergies, get normal M&Ms. And everyone gets like a handful of like, say, 4 or 5. And so you just pass it around, everyone gets a handful, they don't really know why. And then after everyone has M&Ms in their hand, you write on the board, you know, the colors of the M&Ms, and next to each color, a category. So maybe red is family, blue is friends, green is spirituality, yellow is culture or food, you know, so you've picked different categories. And then you say, everyone turns to a partner and shares a fact for every color of M&M they have in their hand. That way everyone has kind of a different mixture of things to talk about, and they're challenged to kind of think of things to share that maybe they wouldn't otherwise plan to share as they're getting to know one another. So that's one that I enjoy. Another question in the chat: who or what keeps you motivated and resilient in this challenging work? Co-chairs, what do you think?
For me, I think it really is just like the passion that I have for it, and the fact that it never gets old or it never feels like a task that I have to do. It's always something that I look forward to. Like I remember this summer when we had our co-chair facilitator training that was like 8 hours long. I had to go to it right after I took the ACT, which was 4 hours long. And I was like, that was my favorite part of the day because I was looking forward to that so much. And I just like updating my understanding and like further benefiting my learning from others. And I really like listening to what other people have to say because other people's perspectives like really intrigues me and makes me look at things differently in a way that I never could have thought. So that's what motivates me.
I would say one of the things that who keeps me motivated, I think honestly, fellow students. I don't know, just something about being the same age as your peers and like seeing all the like ideas they have and like how smart they are and you know how dedicated everyone is. It really is so restorative. It's so nice to see. And I think it really keeps you optimistic when it's, I think, so easy to become pessimistic when you see all the injustices that happen. And I think what keeps me motivated is seeing the effect of my work or seeing like how it's benefited other people. Like I remember one thing that we did in my school specifically, my diversity leadership team at my school, we helped create the school's first ever Black History Spirit Week. And it was really cool just to see that people, especially in the Black community, were like just so happy to see their stories told. Which is kind of sad that like for so long it just hadn't been told, but I think that was one thing that really made me motivated.
Honestly, for me, what motivated me, honestly, I would honestly just say like the fact that, well, one, like Issa said, I just don't really feel like it's a chore. It kind of just comes naturally, and I feel like I just have to care because I do care. And I feel like everyone should care. But just the fact that, you know, you can affect change. It could take forever, and it might take a lot of effort, but you can do something. And I don't like the idea of just sitting around letting life happen to me because of things I can't control. And so that's why I'd rather be at least like a leader with my fellow peers and my fellow just like youth in general, just to like be that person that people can feel comfortable talking to, no matter what they look like, their background, what they go through, whatever. And then for who, like I said, it's just our generation. Like I feel like our generation has done so much already, and I just don't think that we can speak for other generations, because like it's just like, I don't know, I felt like you know, growing up, a lot of the time people would tell me like, oh, what, like, that's, well, you're young, that's why, whatever. And I'm like, no, actually, you guys have just grown out of the optimism you used to have as a kid. And so I feel like it has nothing to do with your age at all. It's literally just how young, I guess, your soul is and your mind is. And hopefully you can think that what you can help people and you can affect change. And so, yeah, that's all of why I'm motivated to keep doing what I do.
It's a beautiful answer from everyone, but and Lamise especially. That was awesome. Are there other questions in the audience on how to get your club going for the school year before we wrap up? All right, well, hearing none, feel free to reach out at any point if you need training, if you need ideas, if you need support, if you need a network, whatever it might be. We're here to help at YCD, and you can access us and all of these resources at ycdiversity.org. Thanks everyone for coming today. Thanks so much to the co-chairs for leading this session, and to Dr. Richards for supporting them. And we hope to see you all at another future YCD webinar or event coming up soon. Thanks, everyone.